Okay, class, today we are going on a tour through the amazingly awesome plant cell. In this tour, you will go in and learn the functions of all the plant cell organelles. Right now, we are looking at the outside of the plant cell. What you are seeing is the cell wall. An animal cell does not contain a cell wall. We are going to enter the cell through the cell wall, and it is made up of polysaccharides and serves as a protective barrier of the fluids that develop in the cell vacuole and press against the cell wall. Okay, we made it through the cell wall, and now we are going to attempt to pass through the cell membrane. It might be a little tricky because the cell membrane only allows certain materials to pass through. There are two ways that we can go about entering the cell through the membrane. We could either use passive transport, which does not require any energy from the cell and allows certain compounds in the cell through specific channels or pores formed temporarily by membrane proteins. Or active transport, which is the total opposite of passive. It requires energy from the cell, and there are three different types of active transport. We could use endocytosis, phagocytosis, or exocytosis. But I think the easiest route would be using passive transport. Okay, so now that we made it through all the protective barriers of the cell, we can tour through the cell. We are now entering the vacuole. This organelle is the largest organelle in the entire plant cell. In the animal cell, the vacuole is not as big. It is used for storing nutrients and waste products. It helps increase cell size and regulates turgor pressure. Okay, now we are going to go through the rough ER. It is the organelle in the distance and looks really bumpy. It looks like that because attached to the rough ER is ribosomes. The rough ER has many functions. It channels proteins to transport vesicles, attaches carbohydrate to some proteins, and it is involved in membrane production through the production of vesicles. Going back to what I mentioned before about ribosomes attached to the rough ER, those are called attached ribosomes, and they are the site of protein synthesis and produce proteins for use outside the cell or for use in the cell membrane. There is also another type of ribosomes called free ribosomes, which have the same function as attached ribosomes, except instead of being attached to the rough ER, they are suspended in the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the entire region between the nucleus and the cell membrane. The cytoplasm is what we have been traveling on throughout this tour. Okay. Oh, and by the way, there is another type of ER, and it is the smooth ER. The smooth ER is right beside the rough ER. It synthesizes lipids, including phospholipids and steroids, metabolizes carbohydrates, detoxifies drugs and poisons, stores calcium ions, and lacks attached ribosomes. Next, we are going to go through the Golgi apparatus. It consists of flattened membranous sacs. It receives transport vesicles from the ER and modifies the products. It produces certain molecules, lysosomes, and secretory vesicles. Secretory vesicles carry Golgi-modified products to the cell membrane. They fuse with the cell membrane, releasing the contents to the outside of the cell. Along with the secretory vesicle, there is also a transport vesicle, and its only function is it carries ER products to the Golgi. Now we are going to enter the organelle that controls the cell, and contains the nucleolus and chromatin. This organelle is the nucleus! The nucleus is surrounded by the nuclear envelope, which is a double membrane that forms the boundary between the nuclear contents and the cytoplasm. Like I mentioned before, the nucleus contains the nucleolus and chromatin. The nucleolus is where components of the ribosomes are synthesized and assembled. Chromatin is uncoiled and not condensed whatsoever. It consists of DNA and proteins. Chromatin also condenses down to form chromosomes. Now that we are out of the nucleus and all, we are going to tour the mitochondria, which is the cellular respiration, and it produces ATP from sugars, fats, and other fuels. Next we have chloroplast, which is only in the plant cell and is usually a green color. It is the site of photosynthesis. The microtubulous cytoskeleton is a lot like our skeleton. It helps to maintain cell shape and the internal movements of cell organelles, as well as cell locomotion and muscle fiber contraction, could not take place without the cytoskeleton. Now that our tour of all the organelles in the plant cell is coming to an end, I'm going to tell you some interesting facts about cilia and flagella. Cilia produces an oar-like motion. There are many per cell, and they are much shorter than flagella. Flagella, on the other hand, produces a snake-like motion. There are one or two per cell, and they are longer than cilia. To conclude this tour, a fun fact about biology is the cell theory. It is one of the most basic principles in biology, and it states that all living things are composed of cells. Well, that's it. Thanks for listening. Deuces to your mooses!